So not only did requests come from Rome, but also Leo sent out decretals, decrees from Rome. He was a sort of umpire also for disputes. Now, Rome was not only the standard of orthodoxy, but also, you can say, Rome held on to the true faith, in the sense that when other people were wavering, the Pope would stand firm. Pope Liberius was right in the middle of the Arian heresy, and many bishops had already become Arians, but through fear of the emperor, and it was Liberius who stood firm and held on to the true faith. It's a story of Pope Vigilius, Vigilius. You can probably read it in Wikipedia, but I don't know if their version is the right one. It's a very important, in my mind, a very important story. And Vigilius was a well-born, well-connected cleric, a man of the world, and he wanted to be pope. And he kept on losing papal elections, though. No matter how much money he spread around, he couldn't get the others to vote for him. Theodora, the wife of Justinian was the emperor, the Roman emperor who lived in Constantinople. Theodora was his wife. She was a monophysite. She did not accept the teaching of Chalcedon, and her bishop had been deposed by the Pope because he was a monophysite, and so he put his own bishop there in Constantinople. Now she was convinced of the monophysite heresy. She wanted the church to be monophysite, and so the Vigilius played up to her. So Vigilius was her man. He declared himself to be a monophysite as well. So she wanted Vigilius to be pope, and so she engineered his election. How did she do that? Well, he told her, first of all, okay, he would become, if he became pope, he would declare this to be the true teaching of the church. The Pope died. Well, the Pope died. Basically, Theodora had the Pope killed in order for Vigilius to be elected. But by the time Vigilius went to Rome, the electors, they weren't cardinals, but the electors had already elected somebody else named Silverius to be Pope. And so what the army of Theodora did was to banish Silverius on a trumped-up charge. So they put him in exile, and he sort of died on the way through rough handling. And then with the army, the Justinian's army in Rome, the cardinals, or they weren't cardinals, but the electors were told that it would be a good idea to elect Vigilius, failing which there might be trouble. So they obediently elected Vigilius once Silverius had died. Well, actually, they elected him before Silverius had died because he had been forced to write an application, but then it was ratified afterwards. So fine, so he's Pope now. Vigilius is Pope. Everybody recognizes him as Pope. What's going to happen now? So Theodora sends a letter to him, saying, well, you haven't issued this decree yet. What's going on? You got to issue this decree, reinstate my bishop, and declare this is the teaching of the church. And so he writes this letter back to Theodora, an incredible letter. He says this: "My august lady, I cannot do what you ask. Formerly, I spoke wrongfully and foolishly, but now I refuse to restore a man who is a heretic and who has been condemned by the church. Though unworthy, I am vicar of the blessed Peter the Apostle, as were my predecessors, the most holy Agapetus and Silverius, who he had helped to kill, who condemned him." So what happened? Well, he knew what he was in for. So becoming Pope, he was unable to declare the monophysite heresy as the true teaching of the church. So, of course, what happened? Theodora sent her people over there. They dragged him back to Constantinople. He spent 10 years in prison in Constantinople, having pressure put on him to declare the monophysite heresy the true teaching. So that's an example, if you want, from church history of this primacy and infallibility, and that the Pope is not going to go wrong even under pressure. And he's not the only one. In 655, Pope Martin I was exiled, starved, and died, refusing to accept a heresy that was being pushed by the Eastern government, the Eastern emperor. after the 5th century, the church, the lights go out in Europe for a while, and particularly after the 9th and 10th century. The Dark Ages, that we call it, it's not the period right after the Roman Empire, it's really the 9th and 10th century when things, Europe is invaded. It's invaded by Muslims from the south, by the Magyars from the east, by the Vikings from the north. It's really a terrible time, and so Europe sort of hunkers down for 200 years, trying to wait this out until finally, at the beginning of the 11th century, things start to become, there's an economic boom and things settle down. So during those 2 centuries, the Pope, like everybody else, more or less hunkered down. And the papacy became a factional thing. That is to say that there were different families in Rome, each one wanted to put their own candidate there. And so it's a very difficult time for the church. The Pope really, basically is not exercising any power at all during those 200 years. The people who are being elected are not, interestingly enough, not a single one of them, even though a lot of them were not very spiritual people, none of them writes anything which is heretical, but nor do they really exercise their power. So for a couple of hundred years, the powers of the Pope fall into disuse. They're not being used. So Gregory, the reforming popes in the 11th century, maybe culminating with St. Gregory VII, Hildebrand, began to restore this, and they began to once again to acquire for themselves powers that the earlier popes had exercised. The purpose of the primacy is to build up and maintain the church in her unity of faith and her communion and charity. The Pope is bound by revelation, by the way. Some people say that, well, by making the Pope infallible, you're making him more powerful. But in fact, you're not. If you stop and think about it for a minute, when you say the Pope is infallible, then you are lessening his powers, because anything one of his predecessors has said, he's bound by it. He can't change it. So he has to go by exactly what's gone before. And we know that anything the Pope is going to teach is according to divine revelation. It's what our Lord has revealed. And so he doesn't have a free hand anyway. But it is what we mean by infallibility, it's not the same as impeccability. And it doesn't mean that the Pope cannot sin. The Pope can sin, he does sin. The Pope is a sinner like us. He goes to confession regularly, probably every week. I'm not privy to Benedict XVI's habits, but almost certain he goes to confession every week. And so infallibility is something different from not being able to sin. It's not the same as inspiration either. Inspiration is that gift that is given to authors of the gospel so that their writings contain, without error, the truth which God wished to confide to us through sacred scripture. Now, when we say a doctrine is infallible, we don't mean that it can't be changed in its formulation. Like every other statement of faith, any definition, even what we call an ex cathedra definition, which the Pope gives as supreme pastor of the church, even those will fall short of capturing the fullness of the divine reality that they're trying to express. So, but what's going to happen, as I said earlier, subsequent declarations will never contradict the previous one, but they might go deeper in explaining it. So no future expression will ever contradict a statement that has been issued ex cathedra.